Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am creating a colorful postage themed card featuring the brand new Essentials by Ellen release available today over at ellenhutson.com. I absolutely love this release because it's really centered around handwritten notes, things sent in the mail, and that includes this brand new first class stamp and coordinating die set. Now, I love this set. It is so much fun, and I think there's so many things that you can do with it, but I wanted to create a cluster of colorful postage on my card front. And so I am taking several of the stamps included in this stamp set and I'm arranging them on my MISTI stamping tool. Now I'm going to be doing quite a bit of stamping with this arrangement. So once I get them arranged, I'm going to leave them in place. And the first thing I'm going to stamp is some craft foam. This is just some standard white craft foam that you can find in the craft aisle of your local big box store. You can find it online as well. And I'm going to be doing some stamping with this craft foam. So I'm going to start out by placing it into my MISTI. I'm going to ink up my stamp with a light gray ink and stamp all of these postage stamps. We'll see how many times we can say that in today's video onto the fun foam. Now, this ink isn't really going to dry on this fun foam, and that's okay. I just need these to create blocks of color on my postage. And so what I'm going to do to keep my hands from getting too inky is I'm going to take a scrap piece of paper and just rub all over the surface of this foam where I've stamped and pull up some of the extra ink. I'm going to flip it over and do it again. So I'm just blotting off the extra ink and just making sure I'm not going to transfer ink to my project. And this worked pretty well. So some of that ink did dry and soak into the fun foam, and the rest I just removed with this paper. And now I'm going to go through and I am going to trim out these postage stamps. Now I only want the center portion of the postage stamps to stamp with. And so I'm just going to take my scissors, and all of these are straight lines. I'm going to cut along the inner frame line that stamps on these postage stamps. If you look at this stamp, there is an outer postage edge. And on the center of that, there is a straight line frame that surrounds each of these images. So I'm just trimming along that inner frame of each of these images. Now this goes pretty fast because, as I mentioned, these are straight lines, and a pair of long blade scissors really helps me to get straight lines on these longer edges. And once I get them all trimmed out, I'm going to set them aside. And I'm going to stamp all of these stamps again onto some white cardstock this time. I'm going to be doing a little emboss resist, so I've prepped the surface of my white cardstock with a powder tool, and now I'm inking up the stamps with some VersaMark ink and stamping those onto the white cardstock. I'm just using my Pink Fresh Studio stamp press tool to make sure I press all over the surface of all of these stamps. And then I will remove my cardstock from the MISTI stamping tool and add some super fine detail white embossing powder over all of my images. And then I can use my heat tool to melt that embossing powder. And when you're doing something like this where there's white on white, I recommend just tilting it in the light and just inspecting all of your images really well to make sure you have that powder melted. If it looks grainy, it's probably not melted all the way, and you may need to hit it for just a second or two longer with your heat tool. But it should look really nice and smooth and shiny when you're done. Now, because I wanted to do a test run of this before I stamped my embossed images, I'm going to just stamp all of these images again onto some white cardstock using that light gray ink. And then I'm going to take the fun foam pieces that I've trimmed out using my scissors. I'm going to add a little bit of removable adhesive to the area that I stamped on. And then I am going to arrange them on top of the other images. Now, these are easy to line up because I do still have some faint gray stamped lines on there, so I know which image goes with which stamped image. So as I mentioned before, I'm just adding removable adhesive to the tops of each of these, lining them up with the coordinating stamped images. And once I get them all into place, I'm going to close the lid of my MISTI and pick up all of these fun foam stamps that I've created. Now these fun foam stamps are going to allow me to stamp solid blocks of images on the inner portion of these postage stamps and not take all of that color all the way out to the edge of the stamp. So it's only going to stamp in that kind of predefined framed in area within the postage stamp, and the postage stamp edge will be left plain white. You'll see this here in just a moment. Now I'm just pressing these all into place onto my MISTI stamping tool. And then I'm going to start inking these up, and I am stamping onto the gray stamped images first, just to make sure I like the color selections for each of these stamps. Now the cool thing about using this fun foam is you actually get pretty decent stamped images. You can clean it off so you can use it multiple times. And when you're done with it, if you want to stick them back into your stamp set to save them for the next time, you absolutely can. Now, in order to remove that removable adhesive from the lid of my MISTI stamping tool, I will just take an alcohol swab and just kind of scrub it away. And that's why I use the removable adhesive over a permanent adhesive. It just comes off of the lid of my MISTI stamping tool a little bit easier. But you can see I'm getting some really nice solid stamped images here. If you're finding that you're not getting nice solid images, you may need a cardstock shim under the piece of paper or cardstock that you're stamping. Because the fun foam is not quite as deep as a normal photopolymer stamp, you may need a little extra height behind your cardstock that you're stamping. So you can just add a cardstock shim behind that, and that will help kind of boost your paper up and help you to get better stamped results. And along some of the edges, I was having difficulty getting the images to stamp well, and that's really because I needed a cardstock shim behind that. Now, once I had my color map all made out, I'm going to put my heat embossed images into the MISTI stamping tool, and I'm going to start inking these stamps a couple at a time and stamping them right over the white heat embossing. Now, the white heat embossed image will resist the dye-based ink that I'm putting on top of it. And if you find that there's some ink sitting on top of your white heat embossed images, you can just kind of dab that extra ink away with a clean paper towel. And if for some reason you find that your heat embossed images have kind of lost their luster, you can just quickly hit these images with a heat tool again. I didn't find that necessary in this case. I found that these stamped really well and I got great coverage. There was one ink pad that I used. It was my Suede Shoes ink pad that had a ton of ink in it. And when I went to wipe away the excess ink that was sitting over the top of my embossing powder, I did smudge that ink a little bit, but that was kind of the exception to the rule because it was a really juicy ink pad. I had just re-inked it. So I'm working my way through stamping all of these postage stamp images. I am using Do-Si-Do, Wintergreen, Hot Tub, and Suede Shoes. This is a beautiful color combination with that pop of blue. I have to tell you, I don't use true blues very often, but I think that this pop of that Suede Shoes color is really beautiful with this color palette. And this color palette was inspired by my friend Heather Meeson. I didn't want to take credit for it. So you can see I'm just wiping away the excess ink that's sitting on top of the embossing powder. I did smudge it a little bit, but in the end it worked out just fine. I used the coordinating die set to die cut all of these images out, and now they are ready to arrange on my card front. Now, in order to give my card a little bit of flair, I'm going to be using the new Postage die set from the Essentials by Ellen line. This is also part of this brand new release that's available today. And this die set has not only the outer postage edge, but it also has coordinating rectangles that kind of nestle inside of those. And so I'm going to take those coordinating rectangles that nestle inside of the postage shaped dies, and I'm going to die cut them from Fun Foam again. So there's a larger one and a smaller one. I'm going to die cut both of those from some more Fun Foam. I'm using my regular die cutting sandwich here, so I haven't changed anything up. If you are not getting a great cut when you're running this through your die cut machine, you may need just a small light cardstock shim, but I found that these cut beautifully when I ran them through my die cut machine. And now I'm going to take the postage edge die here. I'm going to run that through using some white cardstock to die cut that out. And you can see I have that beautiful postage edge card front for my card. Now I'm going to take the rectangle that I've die cut out of some fun foam, and I'm going to nestle that right inside of my die cut cardstock shape. And I'm going to use some removable adhesive again to attach it to the lid of my Misty. And then I'm going to use this to stamp a solid background onto this cardstock. And I just thought this was kind of a fun way to add color to this postage shape and maintain the white edge. Now, if you didn't want to stamp with the fun foam for this, you could mask off the outer edge of this postage shape and then just ink blend into the center. But I thought this was a fun way to kind of give it a more antique-y vintage look, because the stamping's not going to be perfect. Now I started by stamping in this buttercream ink from Catherine Pooler, and I thought this was going to be it. It wasn't it for me, but I wanted to show you something. I wasn't getting the best stamped results with this, and this is when I kind of discovered that a cardstock shim could really help. And no matter what I did, when I pressed along those edges, I just wasn't getting a clean stamped image. So what I did was I cleaned my stamp, and then I grabbed Concord and 9th Ballet Slipper ink. This just suit my color palette a little bit more. And then I'm going to stamp that onto some white cardstock. Now you're going to see when I first stamp it, it doesn't really stamp that well. So I'm going to stamp it down. I'm going to put pressure all over it, and I don't get a great image. So I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to add a single cardstock shim behind it. It happens to be a postage shaped piece here that I'm going to slide behind it. And I got a little bit better results, and I thought, you know what? This is why I'm not getting the greatest stamped results. That fun foam just wasn't thick enough. So I removed it again, and I grabbed two A2 size pieces of white cardstock, placed it behind the cardstock that I was trying to stamp, pressed it down, and presto, I got great stamped results even with this large area of fun foam. So then I went ahead and took that over. I die cut it out using that postage edge die, and that is going to be my card front. So I'm just going to take a few of these colorful postage pieces that I created and add them onto my card front using some fun foam to pop them up. I had actually adhered them to another card base, and I didn't like my arrangement, so I cut them off of that. And now I'm adding them on with liquid glue, and I'm just kind of arranging them in a cluster on the front of the card. And I'm allowing that bright blue postage piece that says friend to be kind of my pop of color that's a little bit different than all of the other colors that I used. And that's really key for me when I'm picking color palettes. I like to have one that's kind of my color pop. It's kind of the one I use in smaller increments, but it really does add a really nice pop of color. Now I die cut a little heart using some matte gold cardstock from Concord and 9th, and I placed that onto my card. And now I'm going to take some foam and add it to the back of this postage shaped card front and add that all onto a top folding A2 size card base. That finishes off my first card, but I had several postage pieces left over. And so I went ahead and just arranged a few more of those onto a top folding white A2 card base that I created using some Essentials by Ellen linen cardstock. Once again, I'm going to allow the bright blue friend piece to be my pop of color, and I'm going to nestle one of those gold hearts into this cluster as well. So this is kind of just a little change up on the layout and the colors that I used for the background, but overall it's a very similar card. So you can tell me in the comments below which is your favorite, the one with the pink background or the very simple one on just that white linen background. So in the cover photo, you'll notice that I created a couple of coordinating envelopes, and I did that using the brand new A2 envelope die from the Essentials by Ellen line. I also used the envelope liner die, and this die set has 3 dies included. And you can actually cut out all of the pieces that you need to create this envelope out of one 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. And the way that I do that is I take that large base piece and I kind of trim around it with my scissors. And then this little scrap piece is where I'm going to cut all of my flaps from. So I have my bottom and my side flap here, and I'm just kind of holding them in place onto the scrap of cardstock using some tape here. and I'm going to run those through the die cut machine. Now I'm also going to need a second side flap, and so I'm just repositioning that die on that same scrap and running that through my die cut machine again. And then I ran that main base piece through my die cut machine as well. And these are all the pieces that I have. So I have my main piece for my envelope, I have my bottom flap, and my 2 side flaps here. And these are all the pieces that I need to create an envelope. Now this die set will also create the score lines that you need on each of these pieces. So I'm just folding on the score lines and reinforcing those folds with my Teflon bone folder. Now, sometimes I find that these smaller flaps are kind of difficult to get started. So what I like to do in that case is kind of fold it in the wrong direction a little bit to start with, and then I can fold it over and really score that score line down. So you'll see me kind of just folding along that score line very carefully and then reinforcing everything with my bone folder. Now, these envelopes really do come together very quickly. I recommend using not the heaviest weight cardstock that you have. I find that Concord and 9th cardstocks work better because they're not like 110 pound, but use a lighter weight cardstock or even a heavyweight pattern paper would work for this. And now that I have all of my folds reinforced, I'm just taking some strong double-sided adhesive and I'm placing it along those flaps that the score lines create. This happens to be 1/8 inch Scor-Tape and it tears very easily. So I like to use it for things like this because I know my envelope's going to be secure. Now those are the 3 areas that I need adhesive to begin with. And so once I have them on the flaps, I'm going to remove the backer from that adhesive and I'm going to line up this bottom flap along the bottom of my envelope base piece. So I have the tab folded over and I'm just lining up the score line or the fold line with the bottom of the base piece. So you're going to see I'm going to attach it there and it folds open and close very easily. Now I am taking the first side flap and I am keeping that tab folded in, and once again I'm lining up the fold line with the side of this envelope, and it kind of just nestles right in there. It's very easy to place. You can see my envelope is already coming together so quickly. Now I'm going to rotate this and do the same thing on the other side of the envelope. So I'm just folding that tab back. I have my adhesive exposed and I'm going to line up the fold line along the side of this envelope base piece. And that's going to give me kind of the assembled open envelope. And I think it would be really fun to kind of close this up with some twine instead of adhering it all together. But basically the last step is just to adhere that bottom flap to those 2 side flaps. And once again, I like to use this strong double-sided tape for it. So I'm just adding it along those slanted edges of the bottom flap. I'm removing the backer from both of those pieces of adhesive, and then I'm going to fold in my side flaps first, and then fold up my bottom flap, and that creates my envelope. Wasn't that super easy? I had such a great time with this die making coordinating envelopes for all of my projects in this release. And if you want to take your envelopes to the next level, you can grab the A2 envelope liner die. I die cut that out of some white cardstock and then just fold it along the crease line. And when I'm adding my liner to my envelope, I like to flip it over and I just add adhesive to that top kind of triangle part. Then I can just slide that into the envelope and I'll line up the liner with that top flap, press it into place, making sure that both of those score lines line up. And now I have a beautiful contrasting liner inside of my envelope. It's so fun to do these with metallic or stamped pieces as well. And you can see in this photo, I created a couple of coordinating envelopes, and for the liner, I used the Essentials by Ellen Skinny Stripe stamp to create those beautiful coordinating stripes on the inside of the envelope. So there you have it, a couple of very colorful postage themed cards that kind of have a vintage vibe to them. I absolutely love how they turned out, and I love those coordinating envelopes as well. As always, I will have links to the featured supplies used in these projects in the description at YouTube, so if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. Be sure to join me over on Instagram today too, because we are having an Instagram hop to celebrate this brand new Essentials by Ellen release. There are prizes, inspiration, and a lot of crafty fun to be had, so I hope you'll join me over there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you're here today. If you loved this video, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my paper crafting and card making video tutorials. Thanks again for joining me today, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.